everyone. Welcome to the Master Your Moment podcast. I am Leslie, leading you into physical, emotional, and mental wellness. And today's topic is meditation. And meditation is so important because Master Your Moment actually stands for 6 practices. And the M in moment is for meditation. And so that's the key that we're going to talk about today. And I have a special guest for you. Her name is Sarah Boss, and she is an astrology coach and a former teacher. So welcome, Sarah, to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
So can you give us a little bit of your background, what you have done, what you've experienced, and kind of where you got to be, and a little bit about the astrology coach? That sounds really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a former teacher. I have 14 years of teaching experience. So I taught, actually, I think 15 years, because I was in New York. I taught in 3 different private high schools and middle schools in New York. So I taught middle through high school, French and Spanish. And then I moved to China, and I was in China for 7 years. And 6 out of the 7 years I was teaching at very prestigious international school with fantastic students. And my last year, maybe the last 2 years that I was in China, I made this deep realization that I think had been stewing actually for many years before that, that teaching at a school wasn't really how I could best help and serve people. And one of the things that I noticed at the different schools where I was is that there wasn't really a priority that was being given to wellness, to well-being, to physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, all of the different pillars of wellness. And so I was just feeling called to help people I felt that I could help people in a different and a stronger way to create more impact by segueing into what I do now. So I had always been into healing. I mean, right before I left New York, that's when I started to really have what, if you want to call it, spiritual awakening, spiritual integration. That's when I began to do meditation regularly. I got certified in energy healing, Reiki, and I started to learn to read intuitive cards. And that's when everything really opened up for me. And I continued to do that when I was in China. And then my last year, when I was teaching, I started to incorporate these practices into the classroom with my students, as well as offering an intuitive development workshop once a week after school, because I found that kids, in particular adolescents, they're so open energetically, and they really need this. There was a need because there was so much anxiety and stress. And I felt one of the reasons that I segued out of teaching was I didn't feel like the students were really being encouraged to develop the skills that they needed to actually be successful in the real world. There was so much fear to think outside of the box, to make a mistake. And the thing is, we have to learn failure is just a part of life, and learning to fail forward is just something that we all need, and something that I've learned in particular as being an entrepreneur. So, and in terms of also them tuning into their authenticity and really owning that and their unique gifts, I wasn't seeing this at any of the schools. And so this was part of the reason that I segued into doing what I do now. And astrology, I really love. And I do this as well, working with adolescents as well as adults, because it is a lens into remembering who you are on a deep soul level before you kind of forgot, due to the programming, of society telling you you need to do this and this and this to be successful, or your family saying, this is what you need to do in order to belong. And, there are these behaviors that you just incorporate when you're on an unconscious level, when you're growing up, that then become these roadblocks when you get older to actually delving into, well, who am I, and what are my unique gifts that I have to share with the world? What's my unique voice? And so this is kind of some of the work that I do, with both adolescents and with adults. So that's hopefully answers your
Yes,
question.
it
It's
does.
a much
Thank
more
you so
prolonged.
much.
Yeah.
That's really, really awesome. And yes, I 100% agree. Like when I first started teaching, I taught kindergarten for 2 years. right out of college. And it was very difficult for me because I had not been exposed to, you know, a classroom full of kids that had so many needs. And my dad was a counselor, so I knew about a counseling background. And that's when I was like, okay, I don't know that I can be helpful in the school environment in this way as a teacher. And I'm very like non-confrontational, quiet, chilled, laid back. And sometimes a teacher cannot be have that kind of personality. So it did not mesh well for me. So then that's when I decided to go into school counseling and really get the ball rolling on that. Well, what is your sort of understanding of mindfulness and meditation? Because I know a lot of people, you know, there's a good talk about meditation, but not everybody understands it, and they think sometimes it's just this woo-woo thing, and or that's only for people who are like Buddhist and things like that. So, can you tell us a little bit about like what meditation is?
Yeah, I'll relate it back to what I do, which is really helping people to open up their intuition. So with meditation, we have when we talk about intuition, we have your intuition, which is coming from this very deep, calm, peaceful place of your soul. And then we have the mind, the mental narrative. And so the practice of meditation is just allowing, I feel like it's twofold. Part of it, with meditation is allowing yourself to detach from the thoughts. So to just have awareness and have discernment when thoughts are coming in. Okay, the thoughts are coming in. I'm thinking this without attaching to it, without, giving it a story, which is what the mind likes to do. So there's that piece. And then there's also the piece, obviously, there are different types of meditation that you can do, but really of just calming the mind. And when you are able to do that, to come back to presence and to just allow this. And I'm somebody who has a very active mind, by the way, because I'm an air sign, and all air signs, I'm a Libra, but all air signs are governed by communication, ideas. So we naturally have, the mind going, and but this can create overthinking. This leads to anxiety. This leads to stress. This can lead to problems, for example, sleeping. And so meditation for me has been a really powerful way of just calming the mind, coming back to center, and delving into my intuition. And your intuition, again, is that beautiful voice. That's the loving voice. That's the voice that's telling you you are enough, you are perfect, whole, and complete exactly as you are. And the practice of meditation, which is not always easy, I have to say, like, I do meditation also in different ways. Every morning I do meditation where I'm sitting and it's silent, completely silent, which is the thing I think that a lot of people associate with meditation, but
Mhm.
they have trouble a lot of times when it comes to starting that, which is totally normal. But you can also do a meditation which is walking in nature. You can do moving meditations. Anything that's meditative is really where you are focused and in the present moment. So your mind isn't in the past or focused on the future and what could happen, but you're just in the moment, the I am presence. So that kind of, for me, is how those are the things that I associate with meditation.
Yes, absolutely. Same. I love being out in nature and doing the walking meditations. And I would say, like, you know, a good practice is to focus on your senses, like focusing on the ground hitting your feet, focusing on the smells that you have, and then focusing on how the air feels against your skin, noticing the sound of the birds, things like that. But yeah, I think there's a true misconception about having thoughts and saying, "Oh, well, I'm just not supposed to think. Now here's this thought, I have to make it go away." And that's not really how it works, is it?
No, it's really, because that becomes a judgment which is kind of the opposite of what you want. The discernment is just, okay, I'm observing this is happening, but I'm not labeling it, right? And the judgment is again, it's creating the story, which is what the ego is always trying to do, is to create a story around something. But it's natural, we're human, of course we're going to have thoughts. But when you're able to just take a step back with discernment and say, okay, I'm having this thought, and just let it go. and come
Yeah.
back to the present moment and come back to, like you said, if you're in nature. That's why I love to do those kind of actually active meditations. I found to be really great for adolescents because they have so much energy. It can be hard for them to sit still. And that was one of the types of meditations actually that I did with my students at one point. I would just take them out for 10 minutes for a walk. And I would say, okay, the only thing that you need to do during this time is just tune into your senses. So I want you to give me three things after we've done this, for 10 minutes. What did you hear? What sounds did you hear? What did you see? Tell me about the colors that you saw. I would even give them a worksheet and they would have to fill this out. What did you smell? So just engaging all of the senses to really bring them back again into that present moment and presence. But meditation can take so many forms. It's not just the, sitting still, like with your
Yes,
eyes closed.
exactly. And I think that people need to sort of experiment with different types of meditation to see what they like the best. And when they can get a sense of practice from something that's a little bit more guided, then they can do like you do and just sit in silence. That's what I do. When I wake up, I put on my watch, so I have a timer, and I just time myself for 10 minutes, and I hold my chest and my belly and just breathe in and out and
Yeah.
just feel my breath and focus on that and do, more of a breath meditation. But
Yeah.
so you talked a little bit about, how our kids are having so much more anxiety and even just depression and things like that. How does meditation help with those things, and what benefits have you seen meditation from your practice?
Yeah, well, I'll share with you what some of my students said because I did this in all of my classes. I would start each class for 10 minutes. We would do a different mindfulness technique every day. So sometimes I did with them meditation, like just what we were talking about. Sometimes we did something that was walking. I have a set of sound bowls actually from Nepal, and so I would do sound bowls with them. We did breath work. I wanted to expose them to as many different techniques as possible in hopes that they would find something, that really helped and resonated for them. And so what was really interesting was twofold. First of all, I noticed they love the sound bowls. They absolutely love the sound bowls. And a lot of times
Yeah,
would fall
I,
asleep.
I actually have a sound
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Oh, amazing. Love that. Well, also because the sound bowls, one of the things that they do is they get the chi, your energy flowing, and they help you, in terms of aligning your energy. It's actually, you can go to a sound bowl healing and it helps with like a type of energetic detox. But a lot of times they would fall asleep. And, the process of falling asleep, they would say, and when we would do meditation, sometimes as well, they would fall asleep. I mean, this was like
Right,
2 minutes. But they were just so exhausted. And this was finally giving. And one of the things that they told me that they really appreciated about doing these practices, because they only did them in my class, it was there was no other teacher that was doing them, but they loved that this actually gave them a moment of the day to pause and to just to recenter, because they didn't have that in their schedule. They were running around. I mean, the most time that they got to actually pause and just be still and come back into and actually reconnect with themselves, but not really, was maybe 20 minutes for break time in the morning, and then their lunch, which was maybe 30 minutes, 40 minutes. And usually they were working on something. If they were in high school, they were doing something academic. They were working on an assignment, doing their homework for the class that was going to happen the next period that they had put off. So it wasn't really time for them to actually just breathe, just to be still. And so this gave them not only that opportunity, but the opportunity just to be with themselves, because nobody's talking. I mean, unless it was a guided meditation, the opportunity for them also to connect with their bodies, because we did meditations that were guided meditations in terms of, connecting with your different body parts so that you could just, be in presence. And one of the things that they told me that really helped them when we did breath work was to calm anxiety and stress before they had exams. So when they would go into an exam and they would get super stressed out, and I had some students who would do so well, they would get so frustrated because they were, they're really talented, really bright, and then they would go into an exam and just in that atmosphere, they would freeze up and then they would forget the material. And so doing things like these meditative techniques that I taught them, breath work in particular, particular really helped them just to calm down right before they took their exam. And also the intuitive techniques that I helped them to develop, this was particularly useful when they did exams, because one of the main commentaries that they would tell me about is that they would take an exam and then they would say, oh no, I need to change that. And then they would get the answer wrong. And it was the thing that they had originally thought. It was the first thing that came in.
Yeah.
And they would say, I knew that answer. And I said, well, that's your intuition. You got to go with the
Right.
gut, you know?
Yes, that is really awesome. So they actually started to use what you taught them in other classes in other settings. And they
Yeah.
wouldn't have been able to do that or be exposed to had you not already exposed them to that.
Yeah.
So that's really, really, really awesome.
Yeah.
So I was going to go into how did you make this into a daily practice? Um, but I guess for your students, you just did that like at the first time in the morning, right? Or like, well, when they first got to your classroom, right? And
Exactly.
just made it into a routine. Why do
And
you think
notice,
yeah, why do
oh,
you
go
think
ahead.
having a routine is so important?
The routine is important, and look, for both adults and for adolescents, I think, because it creates for adolescents, it creates this sense of stability and security that comes from stability. So they know when they come in, I mean, there's a lot of variables that they don't know about. And again, anxiety with adolescents is created, and with adults as well, I would say, is created by the unknown, right? The fear of the unknown. So at least when they have that routine, they come in knowing that this is going to be something that they're going to do. And it's something that they're going to do that's going to help them to just calm down. It's not, they don't have any expectations. For the first 10 minutes, I'm not throwing an exam at them. Even when we did exams, I would still make sure, I would especially make sure that we did this before a test, but it would be a time that they would know that they're not coming in and they're not going to be bombarded by, I need to know X, Y, and Z. I need to do. They can just be, with
Yes.
themselves. So and doing it at the beginning of class, they really, really liked. And one of the things I noticed was that they were more present and focused during class time. I have to
Yeah,
be,
that's one of the things I was going to ask you. Did that
yeah,
not make an impact on their ability to be present and to actually learn from what you had to teach? They can
yeah,
leave all that anxiety at the door and all their worries and all their stress, leave that at the door. And when they enter, sort of like that transition, like I'm going to do this little calm be with me before I can go out and like focus to actually learn something. So
yeah,
I
yeah.
think that's really, really awesome. What challenges do you think that you felt like you had the most with students and maybe even with your own personal practice?
I would say challenges at the beginning, I would occasionally I had students who just had trouble not thinking, just having trouble being present. And so then would ask, why, what's the benefit? Because they don't, we're also living in a society of instantaneous gratification, right? Where you have, now it's normal Instagram culture, social media culture, they're scrolling, their attention spans, or if you don't capture my attention after 5 seconds, we're moving on.
Yeah,
So
that and we always have to be productive and going and going and going.
yeah, yeah. And so that was one of the reasons that for a lot of times for adolescents, it can be hard for them just to sit still like that. And they have a lot of energy. So that's why switching things up and incorporating, so, not just doing sitting meditations, but doing walking meditations, help them to see the benefits, because that would, I would say, be the challenge at the beginning. If they're not seeing the benefits right away, then they think, okay, well, why am I doing this? And in particular for both, I would say, adolescents and adults who have trouble meditating, it's because you sit down and meditate, and obviously at the beginning, it's like going to the gym. It's a muscle. You need to build the muscle. So you have to do it consistently, and it's going to get, easier, and it's going to get, you're going to find the benefits the more that you do it. But it's not necessarily going to be an instantaneous gratification thing. It's very normal at the beginning when you start meditating, especially if you're doing silent meditation, that it's going to be challenging. You're going to have a lot of thoughts, and that's just because that's just been your kind of go-to, for so
Yeah,
long. So if you want to shift you just have to be aware that that can take some time.
exactly, exactly. Did you ever have any pushback from like parents or administration or anything like that? Did they ever say anything to you about it? Notice that you were doing this? What were their thoughts or concerns about it?
It's interesting. They definitely knew that I was doing it because I was the only teacher doing it. And, the principal would make the rounds sometimes and you would see. And actually he came in once or twice and just sat and observed and participated. So there was actually never any pushback, neither from him or the parents. When I had parent teacher conferences, I would even bring it up in parent teacher conferences because what was interesting, at least in China, they were very focused, parents were very focused on grades. Whereas my focus as the teacher was your child's overall well-being. So if I see that your child is falling asleep in my class and anxious and stressed, then I'm going to want to address that more than why they got a B+ versus an A- on their last exam. So I wouldn't say that there was any pushback really. I
Yeah.
actually think it was really well received because the level of anxiety and stress was just so high. And I did these things actually with the teachers as well, not just I did workshops with the teachers and they really appreciated it too. So yeah, there was a
Yeah. That's really, really awesome. I think any self-care practice, like all people need to practice some kind of form of self-care. And meditation is just one of those tools, one of those practices that you can
absolutely.
use.
Yeah.
So what advice do you have for people that either want to incorporate in their classroom or start a practice for themselves?
So in terms of classroom, I would definitely say go on, do a little bit of research into what the different types of meditation techniques are, because I did that as well. I forget the name of the meditation app. There's a meditation app that's quite popular. It's
I think
like the
it's Calm. Is there one that's
Calm, that's
Calm?
it.
Yeah.
Oh, I went on Calm. I went and looked to see what would be appropriate for adolescents. And I tried a lot of different things because knowing that the age group and that, for example, a 13 or 14-year-old is probably going to have difficulty sitting still for a prolonged period of time. I mean, we did everything as I've said, we did walking meditations, we did sound bowls. So I would say definitely research is helpful when it comes to working with adolescents. And then for adults, start with something that feels, and I would say even the same thing for the adolescents, start with something that feels like a small achievable goal. Like, okay, I'm going to sit for 5 minutes every morning. I'm going to sit for 5 minutes. Silent meditation can be hard for people, and so you could start with
Mhm.
maybe music if that's something that is really challenging. To be honest, when I first started meditating, I went to guided meditations, and then after a while, I felt like I didn't need that I was good doing it on my own. But you can start a guided meditation also is a beautiful way to start. And you can find a lot of them. If you don't find live ones, you can find them on YouTube. But start with something that feels like a small achievable goal, like 5 minutes. And then I really feel like if you commit to doing it for 5 minutes, you're going to start to see the benefits. And then you're naturally going to want to do it for longer because you're going to
Yeah,
feel
you will.
so much calmer, So I think that that's honestly a good way to start, and just also no judgment. However, whatever you're able to do, you do. Whatever comes through. If you have thoughts, that's okay. And it is what it is. But being able to also just recognize, okay, I'm having the thoughts. Now let me come back to my breath. Or,
Right.
so many different ways of doing this, but recognizing, and that when you're able to do that, that is so, so key and so helpful in terms of then really being able to distinguish between your mental narrative and your intuition. Yeah.
Absolutely. That is awesome. So I would say you've already kind of discussed a little bit of the impact that this had on your students. Do you have any specific stories of a particular kid that you really felt like your practices benefited and you saw a true difference in them?
Yeah, I had this one sophomore. I really loved her. She was such a sweetheart. And she was my student and she started coming. So I had offered this intuitive development class, as I mentioned, once a week after school, and that was totally optional. And she was So incredibly anxious, and she put a lot of pressure on herself because she also had a sister, and the sister was high achieving, and she was, there was a comparison that happened,
Right.
when it
Yeah.
came to the family as well. And so she came to my intuitive development class, and what we did with were different techniques of connecting with your intuition. So I taught them about things like how to read intuitive cards, working with pendulums, crystals. And she told me, I remember one day we used the pendulum and we went into the energy centers and the chakras. And so, I would tell them if there was one of their energy centers was out of alignment. And so it was her solar plexus. The solar plexus is related to your gut. It's it's your stomach area. And then the next day she went to the doctor and she came up to me after class and she said, Mademoiselle Boss, because that's what they all call me, Mademoiselle Boss.
Mhm.
Mademoiselle Boss, you're never gonna guess. The doctor told me I was having these issues, and it was all related to stress. I'm sure it was related to
Yeah.
stress. And
Yeah.
it was in the area that you were telling me about, the solar plexus. So she would have like these little kind of realizations about her energy and how her energy was connected to what was going on in terms of the anxiety and the stress. And I
Mhm.
saw how much just the techniques really helped her in developing confidence in herself, especially when we would do things like the intuitive cards. And then she would, because this intuitive cards, if you're not familiar with intuitive
Yeah.
cards or
I'm
cards,
not familiar with them.
tarot.
So
Yeah, they're really, really beautiful ways to connect with your intuition through basically the images. And so it just the shift that I saw with her, most importantly, was this change in confidence and really starting to, to have more confidence and self-trust. So that was really nice to see.
yeah, that is really, really cool. What do you think our future has in education with this holistic wellness and a push for more social emotional learning and focusing on overall wellness of our kids? Do you think that education is going in that direction, or what do you think is happening right now in that field?
That's an interesting question. I feel like it in some places, I know in the US that there has been more when it comes to in some schools promoting mindfulness techniques, meditation, and I have read about that. I feel like there's a lot of progress to be made. I think that if we were able to really make this a priority in all schools and schools all over the world, again, I taught in the US and I taught in China. And as I said, same, different schools, but the same issues with kids. I feel like if we made this a priority and even made this part of the school day or part of the school week, in some way where it was a mandatory thing that they're going to learn students are going to learn mindfulness practices. I feel like we would have just kids who are so much more grounded, peaceful, centered, confident, more self-trust, and also who are kinder to each other.
Yeah,
Because I feel
absolutely.
like, yeah, a lot of these issues, that are happening with the bullying and just, I mean, some of it is the age, but I actually feel like these techniques are really ways to help them reconnect with themselves and just develop more confidence and trust and empowerment in who they are as individuals. And I actually feel
Mhm.
like if we were doing this regularly, we wouldn't have the problems that we have. I really
Right.
strongly
I
feel.
know, and I think sometimes if there was just a push of just every teacher making the decision like you did, like no one told you that you needed to start this practice with your kids. You decided that you know how important and what a difference it's made for you in your life and your wellness journey, that you want your kids to be able to do that too, because you know that they're not going to learn and focus without that, that you chose to do that as a teacher. And if every individual teacher, made that push and made that effort, then things would really start to change because I mean, teachers still have a choice. I know they have to get X, Y, and Z done, but you can still choose to say, I'm going to spend this amount of time focusing on my children's wellness, and then start that productivity aspect of like, let's reach our goals and get where we need to be.
And it
And
also,
yeah,
yeah, I was just
go
gonna
ahead.
say it has to come from the administration and come down energetically. Like that's what I've seen at every single school. They have
Yeah,
to make it a priority in order for teachers to take it seriously. And also teachers need to understand why this is beneficial because if they see it in
right.
their own life and to understand that your students are really looking up to you and they're going to the energy that you bring into the classroom is what they're going to take in. So if you come into the classroom and you're super anxious and stressed out, you're giving that energy to your students.
Yeah.
So for
I feel like
everyone to benefit.
we need the administrators to be supportive of it and know that like this is something that's beneficial and yes, we need to do. But if you don't have the buy-in from the teachers, they're not going to really do it either. So
Yeah.
I mean, it's a whole school-wide, issue. But yeah, there just needs to be a lot more progress in that direction. And it's one of the reasons why I recently decided to create a course for educators on a trauma-informed classroom. And so I'm trying to do like a professional development for teachers to be able to do that, to learn how to deal with trauma that has happened with our kids. And not just like, because their trauma may be really different. Their trauma may be that they freak out about every little thing, and that may be a traumatic experience for them. Everybody's is different. We can't judge that, but that's one of my goals is to be
Yeah.
able to help educators. And that's one of the reasons why I'm trying to do this podcast, to be able to talk to experts and other people who have knowledge, who have practiced this, so they can share their thoughts and ideas as well. So
Yeah.
thank
Love
you
that.
so much for coming on. If people want
Yeah.
to know more about you, learn more about what you do, how could they find you and reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. So you can find me on, if you have Instagram, Sarah Soul Boss, Sarah Soul, Soul Boss. Also my website, sarahsoulboss.com. But those are the two main, or Facebook as well. I'm on all the social media. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.